Welcome to the Historyologist podcast, Alex.
Thank you.
I feel like the guy from the 1950s because we're in colour.
Welcome to the Historyologist podcast. We bring you Technicolor.
I thought today a good historical topic we could talk about. Very on topic. It's been in the news a lot.
Yep.
The history of the papacy.
Ooh.
You may or may not have heard. The last pope died. As they all do.
As they do.
Yeah. Hopefully he's resurrected in heaven by now.
Yeah.
Not in purgatory.
That would be ironic.
So no, the Pope is dead. I had a new Pope recently elected, Pope Leo.
Yep.
And it might surprise you to know that Pope Leo, recently elected,
yep,
is the last absolute dictator of Europe.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I have seen the video that you've done on this previously, and it's quite good.
The interesting thing for me about the papacy is that you've got this institution that more or less began 2,000 years ago, and it's still going.
An unbroken chain of church fathers all the way to Christ.
Yes.
Except for the parts where the odd
except for all the gaps,
and there are the gaps, and a couple of popes at a time couldn't work it out, and sort of don't talk about these ones, not canon anymore, and etc.
Etc. Good bit of Latin.
Yeah, well, I meant to do that.
So the way it kind of works is because it's a bit confusing, but the Pope has in the what's left of the Papal States, Vatican City.
Yeah.
The Pope has more or less absolute power. He can grant and revoke citizenship to anyone he wants. He can employ anyone that he wants in the structure of the church.
Yep.
He can, I assume, do whatever he wants to any young man that comes into Vatican City.
Oh, I gotcha.
And sweep it under the rug. Sweep it under the very expensive.
Sweep it, you put it in the treasure room.
Yeah. Just under the Sistine Chapel.
Don't look there, look up.
Two concepts, I guess. There's the Holy See.
Yep.
And then Vatican City.
Yep.
Imagine you had the Holy See is kind of like Australia.
Yeah.
And Vatican City is kind of like the city of Melbourne.
Yeah.
The entity is the Holy See.
Yep.
And it controls the territory of Vatican City.
Okay.
Right. But the story begins, if you can remember this far back, all the way back in 30 AD or thereabouts.
Good year or bad, depending on you're asking. It's like on the one hand, JC got strung up, had a bit of a bad time, but also redeemed everyone in the process.
End of podcast.
Yeah, done.
But yes, so in the early 30s AD, you are correct. Jesus Christ was crucified.
Yep.
Under Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor.
Kind of wiped his hands of the whole thing and, Father, they don't know what they do. Lightning in the background.
He was crucified, and we don't have any eyewitness accounts. Well, depends on some apologists and church people would say that the four Gospels are based on. Some would say that they are actually eyewitness accounts. Other people would say that they're based on eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
And other people say that they're that the authors of the Gospels sort of wrote them down based on stories that had already been circulating at the time.
Because you get that classic line of well, these people were persecuted for their beliefs and their statement. And now why would someone die for a lie? Boom, checkmate.
Yeah. But I guess if they genuinely thought that had happened, but it didn't, but they genuinely thought it did, then I don't understand how you tell the difference between that and that it did actually happen.
Well, it's one of those weird quirks with history, especially when we go look at the West here. It's like whether or not it did or didn't, it's completely irrelevant, because all of Western history and European history and stuff afterwards is based on the belief that it did happen and people acted accordingly.
Yeah.
You know, I say all is probably a bit all-encompassing, but up until, like 100 years ago, that was like most people's view of the universe.
Yeah.
So, it's just, it's history. You have to believe it.
Even if it's not true, yeah.
If it's not true.
Yeah, it's a good point. It is kind of...
Muhammad.
Did he split the moon? Irrelevant. So Jesus was crucified, and I guess just the nature of the Gospels being the main source for all this stuff.
Yeah.
Along with Paul's letters, St. Paul's letters, and the Acts of the Apostles, there's big gaps of information.
Yeah.
But I think what you can say is that he had a following.
Yep.
And one of those people that was following, his name was Peter.
Yep.
According to church tradition, he wound his way to Rome and was persecuted there at the capital of the empire.
Yep.
And that's where he was martyred.
Yep.
But again, according to church tradition, before he was martyred, he established a church in Rome.
Yep.
Historically, it's not really relevant to anything, whether he did or did not. There's not really any information to say that, yes, he did. There's not really any information to say that, no, he didn't. But again, it's relevant because...
That's the story.
Yeah, that's the tradition. And I forget which book it is, but in one of the Gospels, Jesus says to Peter, "You are the rock on which I'll build my church."
Yeah.
So essentially he kind of like ordains him as like the first bishop. And then therefore if he sets up the church in Rome, Peter's successors as the bishops of Rome sort of carry that same authority.
Yep.
As do all the other bishops, by the way, the bishops throughout the Roman Empire. So there's the major ones that sprang up. There was Rome, there was Antioch, there was Jerusalem, and Alexandria, and Constantinople later on.
Yep. They
were seen as like the, I guess, successors of all the apostles.
Yeah.
All the other bishops sort of saw the Bishop of Rome as kind of like the first among equals. That was sort of the
sort of a Roman way to put things.
Yeah.
Not really the first citizen of Rome.
We're all equal, but I'm the most equal. But at this point, so Christianity wasn't like a big thing in the empire. There was lots of small pockets. If you look at a map, you'll see it's like a Where's Wally of.
I think I'll probably get the date wrong, but it's like 300 AD or something along those lines, where it's their first depiction of the crucifix, sort of, and it's a bit of graffiti that was found somewhere in Italy, and it's it's just slagging. I can't remember the dude's name either, but it's like such and such is crucified God. And it's a depiction of a bloke sort of strung up with a donkey's head. And I think the image of that is Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, because it's what a humble king, he didn't come in on a steed, he did kind of line up exactly with the Judaic prophecy.
Yeah.
But that's just a coincidence. the idea of a resurrected God wasn't quite the issue back then, because you had all sorts of characters that were sort of, in the mythology, popping back to life, doing all sorts of stuff. The more bizarre and shocking part about this, new cult that sort of popped up is just like, I get the whole resurrection thing, Son of God, all that, but you're worshipping crucifixion? Like that's...
Yeah.
I think that was sort of the big controversy about it at the time, from my understanding.
Yeah, because to the Romans, the
worst
act
punishment.
Of crucifixion was the greatest humiliation you could suffer. Not only the agonizing death that you go through, but once you die, they would often just leave you up.
Yeah,
for all to see, just sort of dangling in the birds that, come and eat you and.
It's history, you have to believe it.
The very first chicken feed. But yeah, so they weren't called popes then, but the bishops of Rome, they didn't have very much power in this sort of period. They were just tending to their flock and trying to avoid Nero and all these kind of guys.
I'm coming to get you.
Yeah, what was his name? Diocletian, the emperor. They were dodging them like anyone's business. And the big change came in the early 4th century.
Yep.
With the emperor Constantine, later known as the Great.
Yeah.
There was like a sort of civil war battle, and when he was going into the war, he apparently had a vision or a dream or something.
Yeah.
Where he saw the Chi-Rho, like the X and the sort of P Christian symbol.
Yeah.
He saw a vision of that, and a voice or someone told him, like, under this symbol you will conquer.
Yeah.
So on all the shields of his guys, he painted this symbol and won the battle, and became emperor of the whole Roman world. And as part of that, or not as part of the conquering, but I guess as thanks, or we'll say thanks. He didn't make Christianity the religion of the empire, but he stopped the persecutions. He just said it's an allowed religion.
Yeah.
You can practice it as you want.
It's like, look, I know it's frustrating, but you're just going to have to find something else to feed to the lions.
And also as a gesture of goodwill, or maybe the bishops were, doing something for him under the table, so to speak. He gave him the Lateran Palace.
Yeah.
So it's like this palace in Rome that's, been rebuilt and built a few times, but this was the earliest, I guess, official land holdings that the popes would have. As the Western Empire fell, sort of in the 5th and 6th centuries, the Eastern Empire, which still had a strong emperor, they kind of swept in and took over that the Italian peninsula again, and their power ebbed and flowed a little bit. The popes were still kind of, they were more like Roman nobles, in the sense that they were like a factor in securing Rome as a part of the empire. But they weren't like the bigwigs, so to speak. The change came when a little bit later on the Lombard, which were like a Germanic tribe, were essentially threatening to sweep through Italy.
Those damn sounding barbarians.
Yeah. I think Lombard means longbeards. So...
What an amazing culture.
What's your culture all about? We have long beards. Anything else? No, it's in our name.
Yeah, it's pretty much all right there. Sorry, going down the street, you're like, long beard? Yeah, it's like, nice.
So normally, they were threatening Rome and sort of northern Italy. Normally the Pope would look to the Eastern Emperor for support. I forget the exact circumstances, but the Emperor could not provide, or did not want to provide, any aid. And so then the Pope at the time, Stephen II, I think, decided to look somewhere else for support, and he cast his eyes north.
We got ourselves a battle pope here.
He cast himself to, he looked north to the Frankish kingdom
Charlemagne?
of Pepin.
Oh,
Pepin II. What a great name, eh? I always imagine him just as this little tiny man, and he's got like his huge sword, and he's like, I'm Pepin.
just picturing curly hair, barefoot, bloody Lord of the Rings, an armful of vegetables.
So, yeah, he turned to the Franks for military support. Now you might think, why would Pepin actually, like, what does he get out of giving support to the Pope, or especially military support? And at the time, the Franks had, Pepin's dynasty, I guess, had just recently, you could say, taken over the kingdom of the Franks from the Merovingians. So they had a crisis of legitimacy. Yeah. They needed to legitimize their rule of the Franks.
Yeah.
And so in return for military support, the Pope crowned Pepin as the anointed king of the Franks. He was, I guess, officially
He's the guy.
Yeah. You know, I guess you could say that you're the king. But when you've got God saying that you're the king, it just gives you a bit of extra weight, you know.
I mean, by merit of you being king, it's already proof that God wants you to be king. But then when some other guy who's literally, you know, God's voice on earth goes, well, hey, look, I'm just going to rubber stamp that for you. Like, oh, right. All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Exactly. So
signed, dated, witnessed, thank you.
That was like a bit of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type situation. So, the Franks came in and sorted that out for the Pope there. So there was this territory in northern Italy that, as part of the Lombard invasion, I guess, it used to be the Eastern or Byzantine territory. And, you know, Pepin and the Pope was like, yeah, we'll give it back to the emperor. So Pepin comes in and kicks the Lombards out, gets that territory, and by way of thanks, he gives it to the Pope rather than to the emperor, which pissed off the emperor, of course.
What's going on here?
So essentially, this is what establishes the Papal States. Yep. So I guess from that time on, the Pope, in effect, they're the king of the Papal States, and they're another power or temporal power on the European scene, along with all the other ones. Like he's got a plot of land that he can call his own.
From this land, I will make my empire.
Yeah.
And by empire, I mean church.
But yeah, good little consequence, I guess, of that little maneuver is it was like another point of the widening fracture between the Eastern and the Western Church.
Yep.
And also the popes more and more began to turn north for their politics and things like that, rather than towards the east.
Is that what ultimately plants the seeds for the split between Rome and the Greek Orthodox?
I don't think it starts from there.
Yeah.
A lot of it is doctrinal stuff.
Like, what are you guys doing? Bloody talking about Mary? What's going on there?
Yeah, a lot of it revolves around whether Jesus was, I guess, a man who was made into God, or was he God the whole time, or like that kind of stuff. Yeah. To someone not, I guess, heavily invested in it, it might seem like splitting hairs.
Yeah,
but.
It's important.
I guess when you're talking about eternity.
Yeah, it's all these things matter. It's like, what is it in Life of Brian? It's like, we're the people's front of Judea. And you're like, no, whoa, we're the Judean people's front.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I mean, broadly, it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
And the other really, when the split happens later on, the other really big bone of contention is the role of the Pope or the Bishop of Rome. Whereas, in the West, they think, or they want, the Pope is, I guess, the heir and successor of Saint Peter.
Yeah.
You know, so they're the supreme pontiff.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the Pope, as I said before, the Pope is, you know, the first among equals.
Yeah.
It's like their opinion carries great weight, but it's just that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's, you know, it sets up a lot of the controversy and stuff later with, you know, particularly in, you know, what will eventually become the more Protestant countries. But like, look at like England. It's like, well, you know, am I the king, or do I have to answer to Rome? It's like,
Yeah.
Who's that guy? You know, it's like, do I have absolute authority here or not? You know, or in, you know, just getting like bloody lip, however long it takes to get a letter from Rome to, you know, England or whatever. It's just, he's, you know, giving him a bit of lip about it. And it's just like, am I king or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I can talk about that a bit later on, but another, I guess, key part in the split between the East and the West is, I've never actually thought of this too much before, but as I said before, there were 5 main bishoprics. There was Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. Now, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria are all Middle East. So Alexandria's in Egypt. Jerusalem's obviously, you know, Israel today, but in the Middle East. And then Antioch's in Syria. So you had 5 sort of apostolistic sees. Apopos. So 5 patriarchs.
Yep.
That's a better word. When the Arab conquest came through, all that sort of Middle Eastern territory, like Egypt, you know, along Lebanon, all that kind of stuff, that all got taken over into Muslim hands.
Those damn Mohammedans.
Yeah. There he goes, splitting the moon again.
Oh, can't bloody help himself.
So 3 of the patriarchs were no longer within the Roman Empire anymore. And so essentially became a 4 against 1 into a 1-on-1.
Yeah.
I don't know what the end of the point was meant to be there, but there was a point.
It's interesting. No, that's, you know, that's
the ultimate. That's like, I think, the attitude of anyone that listens to this podcast. It's like just that dismissive, like, yeah, that's interesting. Don't want to know more about it. Don't want to inquire.
No. That's this is exactly what I'm listening to this for. Very just dipping the toe in. No further explanation or clarification.
But yeah, so I guess the next big change for the Pope was not too long after it's called the Donation of Pepin, where he was given the Papal States. Not too long after that, but the great man Charlemagne the Great was crowned Emperor of the Franks. Well, Emperor of the Franks, Holy Roman Empire. Yeah, it wasn't called that then, but it essentially the Western Empire was revived. It wasn't as big as it used to be, but it was getting close. So
my understanding is Charlemagne's the sort of the father of kind of both Germany and France, in the fact that his territory covered both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then a couple of generations later, as was the Frankish custom, was to split their
amongst these
territory amongst the children. So it got split into 3, but it eventually consolidated into 2, where you had West Francia and East Francia. West Francia eventually became France.
Yep.
And West Francia eventually became Germany.
So what you're saying is Charlemagne's directly responsible for both World War I and II.
Yeah, if it weren't for him, none of that would have ever have happened. He should have been paying all these war reparations.
So he should have had a clear succession plan.
But it was kind of 100 or so years after that the important coronation was of Otto the First, who, when we think of the Holy Roman Empire, that's the line that started it. So he was crowned emperor.
Well, neither Roman nor holy nor an empire.
Yeah.
Famously said by someone I can't remember.
The Papal States were essentially included in that empire. So if you look at a map of the the Holy Roman Empire around 1000 AD, say.
Yeah.
It sort of goes all the way down halfway down Italy and sort of large parts of what is now Germany,
Yeah.
sort of Poland, France,
Yeah.
that kind of area. Yeah, so the Pope was I guess had his territory, but he was just one of the guys under the Emperor.
Yeah.
The kind of sticking point during the Middle Ages, kind of what you were talking before, it's broadly called the investiture controversy.
Sure.
Essentially was to work out the role of the Emperor and the role of the Pope in worldly affairs. So it was who's on top, the Emperor or the Pope?
Yeah.
The Emperor...
I'm guessing they both had an opinion on it.
They both did have an opinion. The Emperor wanted to appoint all bishops in his sovereign territory.
Yeah.
And the Pope obviously wanted to appoint those.
Yeah.
The Pope also wanted to legitimize the emperorship of the Emperor. So it was only once he was crowned by the Pope that he became the Emperor. Before that, he was the King of the Germans.
Yeah.
Whereas that was the main source of the controversy.
It's kind of funny though, because if the Pope doesn't have to ask for much to step over the king, right? In his request. So if it's like, well, obviously I'm God's voice on earth. I'm here to do a job. Obviously, I should pick out the bishops, right? But for political reasons, obviously the king's like, well, no, we should, I should have a bit of a say in that as well. But also at the same time, what's the Pope's other job? He's like, well, I then will anoint the king, to be the emperor or whatever. And if he only just does those two things, it just makes the king irrelevant almost.
Yeah.
So you can see why that was such a big bloody question. In multiple places all around Europe, over 1,000 years, what is your role? Because even if the Pope only goes, well, I'm just going to pick the bishops, that's still huge.
And they didn't really have the same view of it that we have today. Like when we think of the say the Catholic Church and the Pope, it's kind of like, he's like the spiritual guy, like he's the the teacher about morality and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to, should we invade over here, it's like, just stay out of it.
Yeah.
But back then it wasn't like that at all. Like the Pope genuinely thought that he should be, or the various popes thought, and their foreign policy, I guess you could say, is that they should be in charge of Christendom.
Yeah.
Whereas the Emperor thought, no, I'm the Emperor of the West, therefore I'm the most important guy.
I've been ordained. The proof of my legitimacy is all around you.
Yeah.
You can just see how fizzed up a lot of these kings must be, just being like,
yeah. It all sort of culminated I forget the name of the Pope, but he essentially excommunicated the Emperor, released all his vassals from their oaths to the Emperor. So they just didn't have to do anything that he wanted anymore, and released all his subjects.
Get out of here! Shoot!
and this is the medieval times. So like say 1000 AD till maybe 250, 300 AD. Yeah. That's when the papacy was at its most powerful.
Yeah,
and could do stuff like that, and essentially just destroyed the emperor's power, and as a consequence, in order to get back and become the emperor, he comes back and it's a famous sort of tale. He's in his like crappy robes, and he comes up and he crawls up and he kisses the emperor's feet, or the Pope's feet, and he's like, I'm so sorry. And the Pope's like, yeah, okay, you're the emperor again. Don't do that again.
Like, bitch.
I didn't know this as well, but the popes also did something called an interdict, which is where, like, if they put an interdict on a country or a territory, all the churches just get shut down.
No salvation for you guys.
Yeah,
just...
So
church is closed
Yeah,
Sunday.
so it was a big problem for people back then. But
Sort of standing out the front of the closed door going, oh, jeez.
So yeah, that was a sort of centuries long back and forth about who's in charge of what. But sort of throughout the, say the Renaissance and early modern period, it was just like a general whittling away of the Pope's power. They still had the Papal States, but it just became less. It became more common for, say the kings of France or Spain or what. Just to essentially like just strongman them and just get what they want by show of force. And the Pope didn't really have any way of counteracting that. So they ended up getting a lot of concessions. It became sort of common for a lot of countries, like all this, who gets to name the Pope and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Sort of by, 1550 and onwards, as a concession, the Pope would just, you can just
do your thing.
Yeah, just pick whoever you want. And so, it sort of got whittled away quite a lot. And then, when was it? About 1840s? So not too long after the Napoleonic Wars, the Kingdom of Italy, there was like that sort of nationalistic Italian movement.
Yeah.
And
finally, the Italians got their S together, and it's like, this is Italy, woo!
Yeah, and they
nationalism.
The Kingdom of Italy, and I think it was up in Milan, their capital, because they didn't take Rome.
Yep.
They took all the other papal states, but they didn't take Rome because it's called the Roman question. They're like, what do we do about the Pope? Like, you can't just essentially take over the city with arms, and the Pope wasn't giving it up.
No.
And
it's like he's kind of dressed to be like a wizard as well. I don't want to,
I mean, it's a pretty poor look to just go in and so they didn't know what to do. And then eventually in around 1870, they just went in and took it.
Yeah.
So Rome became the capital of the Italian the Italian state. The Pope was holed up in his palaces and stuff, essentially what is Vatican City. So for the next sort of 50 years, he was essentially a prisoner in Vatican City.
Yeah. Morning, Pope. He's just like, you just see him waving his fist from the window or balcony, like, "Urgh."
Yeah.
Ooh.
So he was holed up there, and
Not
he
happy.
was, every now and then he'd pipe up and say how not happy he was about the Italian occupation of Rome. That's what he called the occupation.
Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Shoo. It's like, what's he saying? I don't know.
But then it was in 1929 that the deal was finally struck.
Yeah.
With the Italian government, the Prime Minister, because they had a king at the time.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister who signed the document was Benito Mussolini.
Classic.
The great fascist man himself. So Mussolini established the Vatican that we know and love today.
I didn't know that.
So
that adds a bit of context to some screaming fucking leftoids that I've heard going, it's like, the Pope's a fascist.
Oh, he must have been on good terms with him.
Like, I'm not sure I can't remember the bloke's name. He was like one or two or three popes before me. But he was born in Germany, and was actually like one of his big criticisms. Like, it was sort of around the time as well. Like, there was a lot of the diddling sort of stuff was coming up. Not that he was a part of it, but the number one thing people would point to him about is like he was just in the Hitler Youth when he was a little kid in the 1940s, which I would say is not necessarily his fault, because everyone would have been part of it. But like, he was absolutely in that hole. I'm not going to raise. Damn, it's a video. It's a clip. The moustached man and his armband enthusiast.
I think, what was his name? Anyway,
John Paul.
One of them, yeah.
Yeah.
But Yeah, so it was essentially this treaty in 1929 that established the Holy See and the Vatican, or the sovereignty of the Holy See and Vatican City. It got the borders and everything that we have today. And part of the treaty was that the papacy committed to neutrality in all worldly affairs. So, essentially that treaty destroyed any worldly power that they had and destroyed any, claim to worldly power that they had. So they, since then have focused more on spiritual matters rather than trying to conquer Italy.
It's like there are different kinds of pope. There's the old classic battle pope, like, oh yeah, we need to go over there, and on the other side there's been dwelling on just theological thought and practice, and I don't have any new insights yet, but it's all still good.
Yeah,
let's just keep rolling the way we're doing,
But yeah, so that's kind of our version of the temporal power of the papacy. I'm sure it sums that up quite nicely. Probably leaves more questions than it actually answered.
Well, I don't know if you've sort of been following it since we've got the new fella, but it's been really funny watching a lot of the political pundits on either side of the extreme sort of throw in their opinions. And one of the things I think was the previous pope when he died, but it's been brought up a lot this time. It's like there was a pundit in the UK that was like made a comment about the so it's white smoke if the pope's been elected, or it's black smoke that comes out if they haven't made their decision yet. Well, this person wasn't aware of that. It was just like, I think it's incredibly racist that we determine what color pope we have by what color smoke comes out of the. It's like that, it's always white smoke because Wario's getting a white pope. It's like, where the did you get that from?
That's some top-notch journalism.
Top-notch. I think it's like a Polly in the UK. I think it may have even been the mayor, Sadiq Khan or something like that. And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah. It requires about 30 seconds of research.
Or like, and again, going back to the extremes on either side of the argument, leading into when they were still deciding who the Pope was, got a long list of potential bishops and stuff that it could be, and on the right, they're arguing like, oh yeah, we want a really base Pope, go back to basics, none of this LGBT, globalism, WEF, environmentalism nonsense, just sort of like straight back to family values and Catholic family values, I guess. But on the other side of it, you've got like, I've seen clips of like Whoopi Goldberg and that on The View, sitting there and being like, well, the new Pope's been elected and it says here that his maternal grandparents were from Haiti. So that means we have our first black Pope. And they all sit around going, yay! It's like, so what is it, the one drop rule and then everyone's happy? Like, and then like there might be some slight mention of, the Pope getting back to, not being for, gay marriage and other LGBT sort of nonsense. But, then you have the right pundit sitting there and going like, he was just talking about the family. We are so back, baby. Yes.
Well, we'll see. I for one would like to see him have a policy of trying to reclaim the former papal states.
Yep.
I would like that. I'd also like to see him have a policy of trying to restore the Bishop of Rome to its medieval high point.
Yep.
That's what I'd like to see.
Because I would go as maybe we're on the same page here, but I would like the Pope to form legions and take back Constantinople. That's a sticking point for me.
I mean, popes in the past tried, or they tried to sort of rev up a bit of support to, take back Constantinople. the princes and kings of Europe, just for various political reasons, weren't too interested in it. The main one being, or one of the big ones was, it's like 1450 or whatever when Constantinople fell. Not long after that, the Portuguese sailed around Africa. Spain went to the New World. And so I was like, well, what's the point? We're making so much more money doing this.
Yeah.
Got nothing to get out of it.
Sorry, Pope. I'd love to help you. I'm just really tied up at the moment. Got a lot of mercantile sort of stuff going on.
But yeah, I'd like to see that. And even better, I'd like Constantinople to be restored, and then the Eastern Emperor to be revived, like the title to be revived again. Even if it's just like he's just the Emperor of Constantinople, I'm happy with that.
Like there's a bit of like tension between like the Greeks and the Turks. I heard that there's this Greek guy that I listened to. One of his quotes that I absolutely love is like, all we need to do to destroy Turkey overnight is to do a DNA test and for them all to realize they're actually ethnic Greeks. But
controversial.
Yeah, controversial. But it's like that's the first step in claiming back the Byzantines. This mass awakening of
yeah. Wonder what happened. Like if not really relevant to anything, but if overnight, if Turkey's just like, we're just going to rename ourselves to Byzantine Empire.
Just what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Shuck. All right, well, here's a funny thought. Do you think there has ever been a discussion in the last 100 years or so since the Vatican State's been formed to make the Pope a nuclear power?
The Sistine Chapel opens up and the nuclear just becomes a Bond villain.
It's just like got a rap of like Michelangelo sort of art on. It's like, as you said, Bond villain, and he's just like, who's your boss? Like he swivels around. It's like, oh, it's me, Leo II. It's in my space laser or Pope space laser.
No, I don't think that.
I've just got the laser targeted at Mecca.
Well, on that note,